Happy 4th of July, everyone. I thought it'd be a great time to go ahead and start our 2022 positional breakdown starting today with quarterbacks, wide receivers, and running backs as we look ahead to the 2022 Carolina Panthers season right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, even here on this holiday week as it is the 4th of July. Hopefully, everyone's out there having fun, enjoying their holiday weekend. If you're working today, well, I'm sorry, but at least you got this podcast to help you get through. Make sure to watch the show and to subscribe to the show over on YouTube so you don't miss a single episode as we're on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays throughout this offseason, as we'll be back normally in 2 weeks on the 18th. And we'll have 5 episodes every single day, basically until, well, next June when we go back into off-season mode. So make sure to watch the show and subscribe to the show over on YouTube, and check us out on all the traditional podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, doesn't matter. Just make sure you rate, you review, and you subscribe to Locked On Panthers so you don't miss a single episode of the show of me, Julian Council, talking about your favorite team. And be sure to follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, get every single Carolina Panthers update I can give you, and to also participate with the show by adding me or DMing me for the weekly Friday mailbag, except this Friday, there will be no mailbag because this is recorded, obviously, duh, but it's well recorded in advance as I am on vacation. And speaking of that, guys, I'm doing all these in the same shirt. So when you see me on Wednesday and on Friday wearing the same shirt, I don't want any comments from any of you smart, I can't say the word, out there. Just recognize that I put this out there for you. Spent my time talking about your team and putting this together so you guys would have content while I'm hanging out at the beach. So either way, thank you to everyone who checks out the show. So again, later on next Friday, we'll be back for the weekly Friday mailbag, but still follow me on Twitter at Julian Council and hit me up anytime you want to talk Carolina Panthers. That'd be a great time this week to look at the roster, look at each position group, and evaluate where they're at heading into 2022. And of course, let's go ahead and start off with the offense, with quarterbacks, with running backs, and with wide receivers on today's episode. And let's go ahead and talk about quarterbacks, which obviously I probably don't do enough of, right? Obviously a joke because I talk plenty about the Carolina Panthers and their quarterback situation as of this recording, which could get changed. I am still waiting for the Carolina Panthers to maybe make a decision by bringing in somebody else, which has not happened. Let's focus on the guys who are on the roster right now. Carolina Panthers currently have 4 quarterbacks: Sam Darnold, Matt Corral, PJ Walker, and Davis Cheek. And if you look at the depth chart, probably in that order. The incumbent starting quarterback is Sam Darnold, who the Carolina Panthers traded for a second, a fourth, and a sixth rounder over a year ago to the New York Jets to bring him here to be the starter. The talk was that with Darnold coming in, he would be able to stretch the field with his arm, that he played ball, loved ball, whatever, yada, yada, yada. And with Joe Brady, Christian McCaffrey, Matt Rhule, and a better infrastructure, he would have success. Well, instead, he was the same Sam Darnold that we have seen over the last couple of years. And a lot of these stats I got are from Pro Football Focus, Football Outsiders. So just throwing those out there to let you know, and also Pro Football Reference to kind of do this comprehensive breakdown of these guys. Sam Darnold last year, his overall grade, according to PFF, was 55.2. PJ Walker was a 52.0. Now, less snaps, obviously, than Sam, but just kind of showing you just how they weren't that far off when PFF was looking at them. Sam Darnold, PFF grade with 55.2, was 36th out of 37 qualified quarterbacks in the National Football League last season. 9 touchdowns, the 13 interceptions, 5 rushing touchdowns. Don't forget about that. Everyone's talking about Sam Darnold breaking these records and all this, and Cam Newton never did that. But yet, that really supplemented the offense early on in the season, particularly when it came to touchdowns, because Darnold didn't have one throwing the football until week 18. I think it was like from week 7 against Minnesota to week 18 at Tampa Bay. That's how long we waited for another passing touchdown, a touchdown in general from Sam Darnold. Pretty much every passing metric out there paints Sam Darnold as one of the league's single worst quarterbacks last season in 2021. PFF passing grade was 54.4. That's number 41. That's 41st among 44 quarterbacks with 100-plus dropbacks. His quarterback rating was 71.9, which ranked 40th. Big time throw rate was 3.5%, which was 26th. Turnover-worthy play rate, 4.3%, which is number 35 overall. Yards per attempt, 6.2, which ranked 36th. Adjusted completion rate was 73.4%, and that was 28th overall. So knowing those numbers and seeing how Sam Darnold play, like, you don't even need those numbers to know that Sam Darnold struggled last season. And we'll talk about the offensive line. We'll get into them on a later episode of these breakdowns. But just focusing on the quarterback himself, he has been by far the worst quarterback, starting quarterback that is, since he's entered the league back in 2018. Not very many excuses you can make for Sam Darnold, considering all the stats I pointed out to you. And this is why I told you going into last season, I did not have any faith in him because he had never been good. Yes, he might have shown flashes in New York. And you saw when the Panthers did the highlight tape, when they traded for him to get people revved up and buying into the bowl that Darnold could start, that, hey, yeah, he's at his moments in the first 3 weeks, 3.5, really. If you count the first half against Dallas before he threw 2 picks there in the second half, he has his moments. But the overall body of work tells you he's not a starting quarterback in the National Football League, which is why the Carolina Panthers were active in trying to get Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson less so, and then when they got to the draft, were contemplating the number 6 pick, which, as we knew, never made any sense at all, and then led them there on day 2 when they were trying to trade for Baker Mayfield, couldn't come to terms with the contract at that time, decided, forget it. We're seeing Kenny Pickett's already off the board. Malik Willis is gone. Desmond Ritter's gone. Let's trade up to 94th overall and draft Matt Corral out of Ole Miss, who I thought was an absolute warrior for Lane Kiffin in that offense a year ago. And I'm a Matt Corral fan. I am. But I just think the expectations maybe should be kind of tampered a little bit, or whatever the hell the word is. Either way, just don't think that people should be too gung-ho about Matt Corral coming in and immediately being the starting quarterback and being the guy who's going to save the franchise. Maybe he could, but these numbers I'm going to give you should probably make you feel even better about Matt Corral and what the Carolina Panthers see in him. As Corral, of the quarterbacks drafted last year, the guys that we talked a lot about, Sam Howell, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, Bailey Zappi, Carson Strong, he was by far the most efficient of the quarterbacks taken in the draft this past year when it came to expected points added per play by the type of play. So it didn't matter what kind of play it was, he was the most efficient. And those are all outcomes from the 2020 season and the 2021 season. He also was the most successful in avoiding sacks and handling the pressure. What are 2 things that Sam Darnold struggles with? Avoiding sacks and handling the pressure. The Carolina Panthers went out there and got a guy who gets the ball out quick, is athletic, can take a hit, extremely tough, and is one of the best leaders at the position coming out of college in this past year's draft. That's what they got in Matt Corral. He will have his opportunities, knowing that Sam Darnold has been statistically the worst starting quarterback since he came in the league back in 2018, and he's never played a full 16 or 17 game season. Corral will have his opportunities. You have Ben McAdoo here, who's working with him, his footwork. He's got to learn the playbook. He's got to understand how to get the verbal and visual cues out to his offense and lead that way. So right now, that is the role that Matt Corral is going to play. I still believe Sam Darnold will be the week 1 starter, depending on what the Panthers decide to do at that position in the days to come. But right now, it's Darnold's job, but eventually it feels like it will be Matt Corral's job, especially if those college stats are able to translate to the National Football League. As far as PJ Walker, looks like he's going to be the number 3 quarterback. Do the Panthers want to keep a third? That's a conversation that we'll have down the road. And then Davis Cheek, fellow Elon alum, been on the podcast before. He's here to hopefully be a practice squad guy, but likely not going to be a threat, obviously, to play a major role on this upcoming roster here in 2022. So those are the quarterbacks. Who's going to be behind him there in the backfield? Christian McCaffrey, D'Onta Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, how is that going to factor as far as who's going to be the backup this upcoming season? Can Christian stay healthy? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including all of the action going on in Major League Baseball this summer. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. And BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. BetOnline.net is the fastest and the easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, including MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, took a look at the quarterbacks there in that first segment. Let's take a look at the Carolina Panthers running backs heading here into 2022. Looking at the depth chart, Christian McCaffrey, D'Onta Foreman, who they just signed after a really good year in Tennessee, taking over for Derrick Henry. Chuba Hubbard, the fourth-round pick back in 2021 out of Oklahoma State. Started a lot of games last year when Christian McCaffrey was out. Fullback Giovanni Ricci. I'll also throw him in here in the backfield. Then you have Spencer Brown, John Lovett, and Darius Bradwell, three guys who I would say are very unlikely to make the roster as we look at it right now. Now, Christian McCaffrey, when healthy, key thing, key word there, win. Has not been the last two seasons. Talked about it a week ago, looking at the Carolina Panthers quarterback play, which has correlated the poor quarterback play has led to Christian McCaffrey having to carry a large load of the offense. And because of that, we've seen his body break down. But we've also seen Christian McCaffrey just have a lot of bad luck injuries since Matt Rhule got here to Carolina. McCaffrey has only played 10 games since Rhule got here in 2020. Coincidentally, the Carolina Panthers record during that time is 10-23. Is that all because McCaffrey's been out, or is it because the team has other roster inefficiencies like poor quarterback play? I would lean towards the poor quarterback play, but still, Christian McCaffrey is obviously a vital part of this offense. And I think had he been healthy, Teddy Bridgewater and Sam Darnold had better seasons, albeit Teddy Bridgewater did have four guys who went over 1,000 yards from scrimmage that season. Still, it wasn't good enough. Panthers moved on, led to Sam, and we saw what Sam did last season. Now, as far as his injuries, and I've been one of the loudest proponents on this, that I just think it's bad luck. I don't look at Christian McCaffrey being injury prone. I don't really necessarily know what that means. I just always felt like it's bad luck that if you get injured, especially playing the game of football at the running back position. Look at Alvin Kamara, look at Dalvin Cook, look at Ezekiel Elliott, look at any high-paced running back in the past, Todd Gurley, David Johnson. They all eventually suffer from injuries, and it just shows you why, as I've said in the past, running backs should be making federal minimum wage, which I believe is $7.25 an hour. But Christian McCaffrey's lucky that the Carolina Panthers gave him that 4-year, $64 million extension, and hopefully for him, he'll be healthy, but he still's got his money in the bank, and he's still a young player, which is why I've not been wanting to give up on Christian McCaffrey heading into 2022. So looking at his injuries, back on September 20th on the road at Tampa Bay, suffered a right high ankle sprain that led him to miss 6 games. As I've said in the past, how is Christian McCaffrey supposed to avoid that when someone comes up from behind him, tackles him basically in a horse collar manner, and rolls up on his ankle? Hard to do that. Comes back November 8th on the road at Kansas City, has a sprained AC joint, misses 4 games. Daniel Sorensen, former safety there in Kansas City, pile drives his shoulder into the turf there at Arrowhead Stadium. How does he avoid that? It's football. Then McCaffrey trying to get back to play the last couple games of the season, even though the season was over at that point. Strained his thigh and glute, missed the final 4 games of the year as the Carolina Panthers shut him down. Likely should have been shut down anyways, as ridiculous as it was after week 2 when Panther fans were saying, gotta shut him down. Come on, guys. Then comes back next season, has 58 touches in the first 2 weeks, short week, goes on the road against the Houston Texans on field turf, strains his hamstring, misses 5 straight games, comes back in November 28th of last season, sprains his ankle once again, misses 5 games, and there Christian McCaffrey only played 10 games over the last 2 seasons, and the Panthers are 10-23 under Matt Rhule. Now, okay, McCaffrey, those are injuries, and you have to plan for it. The Panthers seemingly planned for it when they drafted Chuba Hubbard back in 2021, and I told y'all at the time that was one of my favorite draft picks because I loved him at Oklahoma State, and I felt like he was someone who could come in and fulfill that role if need be. But will he be the backup this upcoming season? Because last year, this man, D'Onta Foreman, rushed for 566 yards, 4.3 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns, had also 9 receptions on 10 targets and 123 yards, filling in for Derrick Henry and helping the Tennessee Titans get to the number 1 overall seed there in the AFC playoffs. As we know, they lost to the Bengals in the divisional round, but still D'Onta Foreman, who was out of the league, originally started off with the Houston Texans after being at Texas, where he, like McCaffrey and like Chuba Hubbard, all rushed for 2,000 yards in a single season back in college. But he came in and he played really well. And looking at him, his body type, as he's 6 foot, about 230, he's got about 30 more pounds on Chuba Hubbard. He's someone who can come in and can fit into this downhill rushing attack that the Panthers have talked about they want to bring in bigger bodies on the offensive line, and also Matt Rhule's mentality, especially since they don't have an elite passing game. Matt Rhule's favorite word to say is that they need to have guys who can run the ball, especially inside the 10. And as we've seen with Christian as a lead back, he's not that guy. Chuba wasn't that guy. Even Mike Davis at points wasn't that guy. And in week 1, when they had Alex Arma with the fullback dive against the Raiders late in that game where they lost, he wasn't that guy. D'Onta Foreman could be that guy. And if you look at his stats last year and compare him to Chuba Hubbard, he was a superior rusher. 4.3 yards per carry versus 3.6 for Hubbard. Missed tackles forced per carry, 0.16 for Foreman versus 0.13 for Hubbard. Yards after contact per carry, 3 for Foreman, 2.6 for Hubbard. Overall, last season for Chuba Hubbard, and this is the thing too, Chuba Hubbard got more opportunities because he was starting more games with Christian McCaffrey being out for the vast majority of the season. Hubbard rushed for 616 yards last season. Like I said, 3.6 yards per carries, 5 touchdowns. Now, the area that he really struggled and why I think he'll end up playing a backseat role, because he's not as big as Foreman, but he doesn't really offer what Christian McCaffrey offers out of the backfield as a pass catcher. You saw later on last season, Amir Abdullah stepped in and really played that Christian McCaffrey role. Hubbard didn't do that last season. 37 targets, 25 receptions for 174 yards. But the main issue was, of those 37 targets, he had 7 drops. He had an 18.9% drop percentage, according to Pro Football Reference last season. And that's just not going to cut it. Hopefully he's been hanging out and checking out the jugs machine this offseason, and he's been working out that way to get his hands right. But as I look at it, hearing what they want to do, looking at what Foreman did last year, the changing philosophy, it seems like if McCaffrey is going to come off the field, the guy who's going to be trotting out there for the Panthers is likely going to be D'Onta Foreman this upcoming season. Yeah, Hubbard will get an opportunity. Based on the last 2 years, McCaffrey might miss some time. So both of those guys will get an opportunity. Will either one of them take over the full CMC role? No, but they can complement him as his backups this upcoming year. So if I look at it, McCaffrey, who even in the short game, 3 games he played basically last season, 80.6 PFF grade. Foreman had 68.3, Chuba Hubbard was 64.9. But the depth chart, McCaffrey, Foreman, Hubbard, as I see it right now, heading to training camp in a couple of weeks. Now, the other position group we're going to check out today, wide receivers. Not a great year for the Carolina Panthers wide receivers in 2021. Can they step up? And when I say step up, can anyone other than DJ Moore produce for the Carolina Panthers in 2022? We'll talk about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This episode of Locked On Panthers is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you may need. Why often endure pointless and seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand our warehouse happens to carry? You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. I'm talking about your smartphone, folks. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto prices are reliably low for every customer. They have everything you need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find a solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box to know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Last season, the Carolina Panthers had the 29th ranked passing offense. A lot of this has to do with the offensive line, has to do with the poor quarterback play, but also has to do with the wide receivers. Because when you look at last season in Carolina, the only guy that had really done anything of substance was, of course, DJ Moore. And looking at the depth chart right now, got DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Terrace Marshall, Rashard Higgins, Brandon Zylstra, Shi Smith, Keith Kirkwood, all guys vying for a roster spot. CJ Saunders, heard a lot about him last year, the underactive free agent out of Ohio State a year ago. He got a lot of pub also coming out of mandatory minicamp, but still, unless he takes over Brandon Zylstra's role, don't really see how it's going to happen. Then the Panthers also have Charleston Rambo, Derek Wright, Andrew Parchment, and Rashawn Henry. But last year, looking at the wide receiver PFF grades, DJ Moore, 76.9. Robbie Anderson, 60.6. Rashard Higgins, 54.7. Zylstra, 63.8. Just demonstrating to you how he was better last season in that role as a number 3, because he had to step up. I didn't put out Terrace Marshall. He's missed too much time last year, but still, he shows you just how poor the wide receivers were, that Brandon Zylstra, and less snaps, obviously, than Higgins playing in Cleveland and Robbie Anderson playing here, was the second best wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, and that cannot be the case this upcoming season. Now, let's spend this time, instead of really bashing the wide receivers, by just praising DJ Moore. Going into the season, Pro Football Focus looks at DJ Moore as their 25th best wide receiver in the NFL. I think he could be absolutely higher had he just had any quarterback play at all in his career. Like, he's battled bad quarterback play his entire NFL career. His rate of catchable targets over the past 3 seasons ranks 62nd out of 78 qualifying receivers. But despite that, DJ still has managed to rack up the 4th most explosive receptions at 15 plus yards with 84. 84. With Kyle Allen, Teddy Bridgewater, Sam Darnold, PJ Walker, Broken Cam, those guys throwing the football to him. He's earned a top 30 PFF grade each of the past 3 seasons, with his best being an 82.2 mark back in 2019. DJ Moore has gained over 1,200 total yards and scored exactly 4 touchdowns in 3 consecutive seasons. Now, if you're a fantasy owner, probably one of the reasons why you don't want to draft DJ Moore, but the dude produces. If you go back to just the last 3 seasons, when you look at those totals, the only other guy who's done that is Stephon Diggs, who was an all-pro back in 2020. Like, DJ Moore's played sometimes at an all, if you want to compare him to Stephon there, which I just did, he could be playing at an all-pro level if you just got the guy a freaking quarterback. Like, nobody had more incomplete targets that were deemed by the quarterback's fault than Moore back last year in 2021, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody when you saw when you saw Sam, then when you saw PJ, and then unfortunately when you saw Cam. 27 of them. 27 incomplete targets that were on the quarterback when throwing to DJ. Now, one issue, though, with DJ, he didn't necessarily always help the quarterbacks, even though there was a couple hospital balls thrown in there last season. He had a career-high 10 drops in 2021, according to Pro Football Reference. That has to improve. Him and Robbie combined had 19 drops. The Panthers can't have success, no matter who's playing, under center or in the gun, if the wide receivers are having that many drops. But overall, DJ Moore has had to overcome such bad quarterback play, and there's no reason to think heading in this year, whether it's Sam Darnold or Matt Corral or Baker Mayfield, whoever's throwing the football to him, that he won't once again find a way to produce. He's posted some of the great, he honestly has been incredible too when it comes to yards per route on his runs. When it comes to yards per route run, 1.9, which 1.99, which is 20th overall. His targets per route run is 20. He has 21.9% of them, which is 23rd overall. And his PFF receiving grade was an 84.7, which is 24th, ranked among 125 wide receivers, 100 plus targets since 2018. Those are his numbers during that time. Like, DJ Moore's been really good, but Robbie Anderson's got to step up. He contemplated retirement. That didn't really work out. Well, because he decided to come back and he said, I'm here, ain't I? So we don't really know where his attitude's at, where his mindset's at. He's got things obviously going on in his personal life. Hopefully he's okay there. Terrace Marshall, a ton of talk about him during mandatory minicamp. Can he really live up to the hype? Because the Panthers need him to. Brandon Zylstra, continue to be a special teams ace. Can he add still to the receiving game? And Rashard Higgins didn't have a great year last year in Cleveland, but if they do bring in Baker, he had a good rapport with him. Can he do that again? Shi Smith, what's going on with him legally? Keith Kirkwood, dealt with injuries the last 2 years. Former Temple guy, was down in New Orleans, came here, got lit up in training camp last year by JT eBay, the undrafted free agent safety out of South Carolina, who was subsequent, whatever. I can't say words. subsequently cut. After that, but Kirkwood, also the year prior in 2020, had the collarbone, hasn't really had an opportunity. Maybe CJ Saunders finds a way. That's how the Panthers wide receivers are looking like heading into 2022 so far. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, guys, make sure to subscribe to the show and watch every single episode over on YouTube. And be sure to check us out on all the podcasting platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and Stitcher. And follow me on Twitter at Julian Council, where every single Friday, typically, not this Friday, I answer your weekly Friday mailbag questions here on the show. Coming up on Wednesday's episode, continue our positional breakdowns with the offensive line, with the tight ends, and we'll even talk special teams. Chris Tabor's here, y'all. Get excited. So all that's going to come up later on this week on Locked On Panthers. In the meantime, stay safe, be cool, be well and happy and good, and keep pounding. And I'll talk to y'all on Wednesday.